Good. Wow. Good thing I cannot see all of you. That's a lot of people. Yeah, welcome from my side. As I was just introduced, I'm going to talk about how we leverage Vue at Shopware. Short update from my side, because on the timeline I still have hair, so now I don't anymore. My name is Sebastian. People in the community that know me call me Segge. I'm a principal developer at Shopware, and I've been there for almost 7 years now. So at the beginning of talks, I always try to get everybody settled, like what are we talking about, why are we here, and the what's it's of it, essentially. So what's Shopware? Well, instead of talking about it, I figured it may be best to show you. Now I have to figure out where the second monitor is, because I missed rehearsal, so bear with me. Okay, close that one maybe. Good. So, Shopware is an e-commerce platform. And like any e-commerce platform, we have a storefront. That's what you see here, or in the next example, or here. So different shops, different sizes, different brands, different possibilities, because we have a storefront that is based on PHP and Twig and vanilla JavaScript, but we also have a composable storefront which leverages VueJS, but we are not going to talk about that today. Instead, we're going to talk about our administration, because that's the area I'm most familiar with and I work with every day. And the administration is essentially the part of the shop the merchant or the team of the merchant uses to manage his products, orders, settings, marketing campaigns, and all that kind of stuff. So now that we know what we talk about, let's continue the presentation. That worked out perfectly. Awesome. Okay, so one special thing is that Shopware is extendable. Why and what does that mean? So if you take that very well-drawn representation of Shopware and the base features we provide, and then imagine, for example, I think payment providers might be the best example I can give you, because there are payment providers you can't count, not on one, not on two hands. Even I think if we combine all our hands, it might still get difficult. And we can't implement them all by default. So in certain countries, there may be some very popular payment providers, and a developer that knows Shopware, or even an agency or partners or whatever, so they have knowledge in that payment provider and know Shopware, so it would be best if they implement that payment provider for us and provide it to the whole community, so everybody benefits. So third-party developers have experience in different domains than we have. Of course, a broad ecosystem is appealing to all merchants, because they can just get what they want from the store. And as well, custom projects, because Shopware is highly customizable, can be done as well. But we need some sort of system for that. So how could you extend Shopware? Like go outside at full noon and cast some spells to the night sky, or apply Git patches to the whole code base? Yeah, it doesn't sound really appealing. Well, let me tell you from experience that one does not simply build an extendable code base. But anyways, we are here and we did it. And one of the things we did is we built a plugin system, and it's the one thing to rule them all and to extend all the shops. So what is a plugin? Very naively, a plugin is a zip archive that contains the following things. At least it has to have one PHP file, and then it can contain as much JavaScript or TypeScript code and HTML files or Twig templates. This zip archive is then uploaded to the administration, for example, where it gets into our system. We load it, we boot it up into the application, and the new feature is in the shop. So what can plugins actually do? The answer is everything, but to give some examples, the plugins have access to the PHP services we have in our core, in our PHP core of the application. They have direct database access, direct file system access, so they can manage assets or add new tables, manipulate data in the database or whatnot, whatever you would need for your feature to work. And now to the exciting part, they are also able to add front-end code for the storefront in Twig and Vanilla.js, and for the administration we just saw in what we call Shopware Vue, at least for now, and that's the catch. And the Shopware store currently has roughly 2,600 plugins, roughly because there are also some other types of extensions in there, and it's only for the version 6 of our software. If we combine both versions, it's more than double that. So you could say it's quite the important thing we have. So Shopware Vue, now back to well-known territory for all of us, you might think. So let's take a look at this example. I hope that's fine, right? Yeah, this is a standard Vue 3 single file component. I know it's not a good example because we pass a prop function into a click handler and we should work with emits, but please don't kill me, let's just use it as an example because it worked out for my case pretty well. So in the template we have a button with an add click handler which just binds the prop action and then some random text in the button, that's the template done. And the script setup part just defines a prop of type function and it's required and the name is action. So very typical Vue 3 code. How would this look in Shopware, at least of right now? So in Shopware Vue, we split the components into multiple files. Very similar to what was in the language server talk yesterday, how they do it virtually, split it into multiple files. We actually do that, but for different reasons. So we have a component implementation using JavaScript or preferably TypeScript, but it's a very large code base and we are still migrating, believe it or not. We have template files in HTML.twig files. Oh, what's that? And styling might exist in SCSS files whenever needed. So same example, Shopware Vue, and please don't leave the room all immediately. So we import some stuff. We import the template from the same folder. We destructure a component thing from Shopware, whatever that is, and then we use that to call a register function. So the component is a component factory. It's a wrapper we built around VueJS components to register them and do much more with them, but you will see that later. The first argument is the name of the component. In this case, it's action button. And the second one is a Vue Options API object. So we pass in a template, which we import from another file. We declare a prop, just like in the Vue 3 single file component. But now for that weird template thing, HTML.twig. Whoever has heard of Twig in here? Oh, that's way more than I expected. Good thing. So in the template, it's pretty much the same as in the Vue template with the block addition. So curly brace, %, block, and then action button. And at the end, we close it. And to understand how that works, we need to know where Twig comes from. Twig is a PHP templating engine developed by Fabien Potentier, the same developer that started Symfony back then. And I butchered the name badly, very sorry for that. And as always, somebody from the JavaScript ecosystem thought, hey, that would be a great addition for JavaScript. Let's build that in JavaScript and port it. So we have Twig.js, which is a JavaScript port of Twig. And in Shopware, we have limited the usage, so Twig can do much more filters, can format your code as well, but a lot of the syntax is actually conflicting with Vue. So most of the times, we only use Twig.js for the blocks. We have made exceptions where we used if statements inside the Vue code to control how the Vue code behaves on the basis of outside influences like PHP variables, for example. Nasty stuff, don't do that. So, back again to the example. Let's get this over with. We have the block action button with the button inside and we end that block. That's in the Shopware core. Now let's imagine we have a plugin that uses the same block, calls the parent, and, for example, adds a span with a suffix to it, and ends the block as well. So what happens here is that Twig.js combines these two files to the same block. The parent call from the plugin actually gets the content of the base block, inserts it into place, and then the rest of the plugin block just gets appended. So we merge the results together. And that's giving us the button with the suffix all together. And now you may be wondering, yeah, but why? Why are you doing this? So why can't you use slots, for example? That's the very normal reaction a Vue developer would give me. Like, why don't you use slots for that? That's essentially what they are there for. But the reason is very simple. First of all, plugins are added at runtime. That's special, but would work still. The thing with slots is they only work top-down, so they only work from parent to the child. So if we want to control the slot, we can only do so by changing the implementation of the component where it's used in place. So with the action button, instead of changing the behavior of the action button for all the action button occurrences in the software, we would need to find all occurrences and then use the slot. A little bit more work and just works not for our project. And if we now try to go full circle and then we get the old stuff slowly out of the way, we can see that the Shopware administration can register a component called action button, and I just leave out the implementation details here. But the more interesting part is what plugins can do then. And that would be they could, with the component factory, extend, for example, if you would say, the action button is fine, but for my use case, I have a better idea just for my plugin in my module, how I want it to work. So I create something from it, and I would just say component extend, then the new component name, in this case, my action button, the original component name, action button, and then you would pass in, again, an options API object. You could define other props, other data, other methods. You could change the template. And then you have your own version of the action button, similar to Vue extends. And then you can also override if you really know what you are doing. So overriding is changing the component for everybody. You just say, yeah, that action button component, not going to work. I change that for the whole shop, for the whole administration, and again, pass in the new implementation with template, data, computed methods. That's essentially what we have right now in place. Are there problems with the system? Yep. Every system has problems, I guess, but the most obvious one would be that the system is very tightly coupled. So if you override a component, we change the component, your override might not work anymore. And that's very unclear. It needs a lot of maintenance, both from our side, because we use some Vue internals, which we shouldn't, but we have to make this work. And even in minor version updates, it could get bad. Sometimes it's just TypeScript that gets broken. Other times it's other things. So from our side, with upgrades, we have to be very careful. From the plugin developer side, they have to be very careful with our upgrades because of the mentioned reasons. An override is directly accessing our code. So you always have to check your overrides, your extensions. Is it still working as intended? Yeah. The next big thing is, when we introduce this, we kind of missed to declare what is public and what's private. And then basically everything was considered public API, and since we are open source, we now have to properly deprecate any change in a component we have not made private since. So there's no clear distinction between private and public API and what you can and should touch and what you really shouldn't. But the biggest thing, even most relevant for all of you, I guess, is that VueJS developers, even with years of experience, excuse me, that Vue developers with years of experience can't use our system without learning something really new. That's a coincidence, this slide. So I probably sound like a mad guy right now, and I'm really sorry for my voice. I'm still suffering from the effects of a cold, but we will get through it. So we thought there must be a more native approach that's not so complicated for us and more approachable for everybody. So the blocks. The blocks, it was not simple to get there, but now that we have the solution, it actually is, because we were able to replace the whole Twig.js stuff with just 2 Vue components. The SW, by the way, is the Shopware prefix. We're just going to ignore that, just there for completion. So we have a block component and we have a block parent component. And the upper part is, again, what we would do in the Shopware core. So we define a block with the name action button, and inside of that block is the same old button we have already seen multiple times. The plugin would also use the block component, but with the extends keyword, which has to use the same name as the defining block component, and then it can call again the block parent in form of a VueJS component, and then adding the suffix to it. How does this work under the hood? I have removed most of the code of this, but you can still get the grasp of it. At the top of the block component, we have 3 props: name, extends, and data. The name would be when we define a block in the core, we would pass a name to it. If you want to extend it, like we just saw, you pass the same name. And the block can have data, which is essentially context in form of props, data, or computers that we can define when we define a block, and you have access everywhere to it. In the setup function, the first thing we do, check, is this block extending? If it's extending, we add it to a stack of blocks, which are just key values. The key would be the block name, and the value would be the default start rendering function. And the template of the block is a computed with just, pops the last block out of it, which has no parent, renders it, combines all the other blocks that are overriding, calling parents, until we get a combined template and the right result, and returns that template and throws that into a render function. That's the block implementation. What about component data or logic? So the implementation of the component. If we remember this, it's still using options API, and I didn't show you this, but the implementation with the component register and override is also able to resolve like function overrides, and it's able to call parents. So it's a very complicated implementation right now. And if we want to make the move, first thing we would need to do is change to composition API. We don't have to, but we want to, because it's somewhat becoming the new standard. And single file components, so the template is solved with the blocks. Now this, we already saw that, but it's not extendable. So how could we do that? And on the Shopware side, we have created a wrapper for the script setup function of Vue, which is called create extendable setup. And the first argument is a options object, where you can pass props, other things. Most important for this example now is the name, which is action button. And the second argument is just a wrapper function for the code you would normally put inside your script setup. So everything you see inside that function, like declaring refs, you know it could also be reactives, computers, normal functions. And then we return it in an object that has a private and a public key. Everything we consider private API, we put inside private. That's something you shouldn't change. You can still get it, but you should not change it. The public stuff is stuff where we say, yeah, that's fine. Change that to your liking, to your needs. We don't change this in minor versions. And then we can just destructure the result of create extendable setup and have everything we define inside our function available again in our template and in the rest of our code. Of course, in the And behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff happening, like essentially anything we return in private or public is reactive, and overrides are mapped back to it so that the base component is always rendering the correct result. I think this is going to make more sense if I show this implementation now. So the plugin in a script setup could just call override component setup. And this double function thingy is currently just because of TypeScript. We are working to get rid of that. So first argument, again, is the name we previously saw in the options object of the create extendable setup. Action button, then we have again a function where we can get, for example, the previous state. And then we just declare a new ref, concatenating a plus suffix to the previous message. We call that new message, and we return an object assigning a new message to the key of message. And this would then override in the base component the message ref. So with some magic in the background, in the base component, the most lower evaluation would come out to true, because we have changed the string from outside of the component without slots, without direct data binding. Time for the final lab. So the final core implementation would look something like this. I dropped the props because that's standard Vue, and you know that all pretty well. So we have again the template with the block and the name. Our button is in it, and this time we pass the message of the extendable setup, or of the script setup, into the template. We close the block, that's it. In the script setup, we do the exact same thing as before. We create an extendable setup with our props, with the name action button, and say, yeah, this message is public. You can change the message to whatever you like. And I don't know how well you can read that, but the title of the file is something like actionbutton.override.vue, and this is going to get important on the next slide. So in the plugin, we could then extend the block, do exact as before, and we just combine it with the override component setup function call and change the message to our new message with the suffix. And for good measure, we also have the span with the suffix in there. And thanks to the power of Vite and the really simple plugins, we can write for it every plugin in Shopware that has a something override.vue file is automatically injected into the main entry file of that plugin, and an import is added, and a component register override component is added. But a lot of talking, and talking is cheap, so time for a quick demo. Let's see. Oh, this is going to be tricky. So here is the dashboard of the administration we saw already. I will just refresh for good measure. We are already in the hot module reload of Vite, as you can see by the URL. I have added this for this demonstration. So here is the H1 with the magic number. And I have added a new block inside of a lot of old blocks, as you can probably see. And now we want to change that, but first let's check where the magic number is coming from. Inside the options API object, I created a little setup function, and it's calling create extendable setup with the name dashboard and just publicly exposing the magic number. And here I have a plugin. It's not a zip file, it's already in the system under custom plugins VueJS Amsterdam. And I just have this dashboard override.vue file, which should get automatically loaded, as you already know. So let's try to change some stuff from here. We are outside of the project now, by the way. So I know we need the ref. So we call Shopware component override component setup. We want to override the dashboard. This is a function. And we will return the magic number and just map this to something different. And if I have not misspelled anything, that should already work. Yeah. We changed the ref outside of the code from inside of a plugin. And normally I want to show you the blocks as well, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to step back to the presentation. So, at least the demo for the data is concluded. Yeah, both systems have drawbacks and benefits, but my personal opinion, it's especially with the talks from last day, what Evan said and what a lot of other people say, it's important that we at Shopware align more with the Vue standard to make it easier to onboard more people, to get more people involved, and to make it easier to write VueJS code like it should be. And that's pretty much it. So if you want to get in touch, we have the Shopware community Slack, or you can just check out the code immediately on GitHub, shopware/shopware. And with that, I just have to say thank you, and please excuse the drawings. I made them myself. It's not AI, so if they are bad, blame me. That's it. Thank you.